Okay, small class today, Erev Yom Kippur. So let's bring up the text. Okay, we're going to start from the Gemara again. We're learning the Mishnah. We were learning the laws. We're learning the laws now of Ir Nidachas, a city that are instigated by according to the conditions that we learned in the Mishnah that we're going to go over now in the Gemara, instigated by others of the city to serve idols. So it's called an Ir Nidachas, and the law is of the Ir Nidachas, unlike a person, individual. So if individuals, hey Aaron, so if individuals serve idols, the punishment is skila, stoning, and the property goes to their Yorshim, to those who inherit them. If it's an Ir Nidachas, that the city was instigated to serve idols, and it means one of the main conditions is it has to be a majority of the city. Once it reaches a majority of the city, so then the punishment changes. Hey, Avi, then the punishment changes. Then it goes from being stoning to beheading, which is a much less severe death penalty, but all the property in the city gets burnt, even the property of the righteous, and obviously nothing goes to the Yorshim, to those who inherit. So the death penalty itself is less severe, but the city itself gets destroyed. Now we're going to go. So we learned the mission with all the conditions of the Ir Nidachas, and now we're going to go through the Gemara that's going to break down the laws of the Mishnah. We finished basically the Agadita. We have a page and a half left to Sanhedrin. So we finished the Agadita of Chelek, and like I said last week, some people even hold that this part of the Mishnah, the Gemara, Ariel, this part of the Gemara really belongs in a previous parak. So now we're starting from the Gemara again. We did this few lines last week, but let's continue. Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis have taught. Yatsu. We're analyzing the pasuk. So the pasuk is, again, I'm going to read the pasuk. The pasuk says, Yatsu anashim b'nei Belial. We'll see what b'nei Belial means. Generally, b'nei Belial means bad people. So people went out of b'nei Belial. Mikir b'cha, from within you, from amongst you. V'yadichu, and they pushed Anshe Iram, the people of their city, Lamar, saying, Nelcha v'navda likim acherim, let's go serve idols. Asher lidaitim, that idols that you're not familiar with. I mean, i.e., Jewish people are, the idea of serving idols is something that's unfamiliar to the Jewish people. So first they analyze the person that says Yatsu. What does it mean, Yatsu? Hain. They themselves are the people that go out and say and instigate the community. We're talking about, again, it's not just individuals. One of the conditions of Ir Nidachas is it has to be a majority of the city. So Yatsu Hain v'lo shluchin. You can't send messengers, you can't send agents on your behalf to instigate the city. Anashim, what does it mean when they say men? Ein anashim pachas mishnayim, the word anashim is plural, meaning to say that it has to be at least two people that are instigating the city. That's one opinion. Davar acher, another opinion is that from the word anashim, again, we're going to go through every word of the pasuk to understand the laws. Basically, the Gemara is based on the Mishnah, is analyzing the laws based on every word of the pasuk that describes the sin of Ir Nidachas. Anashim v'lay nashim. Another opinion is it's not that it means two men, but it's coming to teach us, not that they argue if it means two men or not. But what is the pasuk coming to teach us? Men and v'lay nashim, not women. If it was two women or a man and a woman that instigated others to do it, then it's not an Ir Nidachas. Again, what's the difference? The difference is that it's not that you don't get punished. It's that now your punishment is skila, is stoning, you're punished as an individual. It means even if two women come, instigate a city, and the majority of the city, other conditions of the Ir Nidachas are met, but the instigators were women, then the people of the city get judged as individuals, meaning they get stoned, not beheading, and their property goes to the Yorshim. Also, Anashim comes to teach us Men v'lektanim, not minors. If minors are instigating the city, then again, even if there's a majority of the city, other conditions are met. So nevertheless, they get judged as individuals. It's not again what we're learning from Ir Nidachas is the city of that gets instigated to serve idols is not that there. It's not a question of if they get punished if it's a death penalty to serve idols. That's certain. The question is if it falls under the category of Ir Nidachas, which has a lesser punishment for the death and a more severe punishment for the city, for the community, meaning the property gets burnt. Yotzu, so Rashi says, Heim v'lei shlucham, they have to go out. They can't send agents, messengers to do it on their behalf. Im hamadichin atzim yotzu v'hadichin, if the people themselves go out and instigate, v'harihei merubim, and the people that are instigated meet other conditions, means a majority, v'danim b'sayif, then they get punished with the sword and they get beheaded. Avlim educhai de shliach, but if they send a messenger, we can be medayik here from Rashi if one wants to. It doesn't say de shluchim al de shliach, which is the singular. We're going to see Rabbi Steinsaltz that we learned last week. That could be Rashi agrees with the opinion that to answer the question which we're going to ask, which is obvious, the shluchim themselves are the instigators. So if you have two men that instigate to hire two other men to instigate the city, what's the difference? There's two men who instigated the city. So one of the answers given is that two men hire one agent. Because the idea is there's no shliach l'dvar avera. You can't hire an agent to do a sin. So then the agent is not acting as an agent, the agent's acting as themselves. So they'll say, well, someone else told me. It doesn't work like that. You're a responsible, mature person. You're responsible for your own actions. You are now the instigator. So ki yechidim, but if it was an agent, let's just learn the simple understanding. The agent goes on behalf of the instigators. So then ki yechidim, then they get judged as individuals, which means beskila, they get stoned, palit, and their money is saved, meaning to say their monies and their property goes to those who inherit them. Ein anoshim. So the first opinion is it says anoshim plural. Ein anoshim pachas mibeis. The least amount of a plural is two. Again, if one person comes and instigates, then again doesn't mean that you're not responsible. Then you get judged as a individual and you get stoning and your property is saved. So again, this is what let's just to go do again. This is a nice idea what Rabbi Steinsaltz says. I just want to say that this week, this Sunday morning, Rebbe Steinsaltz passed away. Rabbi Steinsaltz's wife, Rabbi Meni, my friend's mother. So it's just a little nishmas of Rebbe Steinsaltz. So the Rabbi Steinsaltz says, the Rabbi Evan Yisrael, the early commentaries ask, why are those agents not deemed subverters themselves, as there is no agency for transgressions? Okay, it's like we said, there's no such thing as shliach l'dvar avera. You can't say, well, I was sent, because you're a responsible person, you're responsible for your own actions. So they themselves are the people that. So he answers. They explain, so there's different answers. So they explain that the reference here is to agents from another city. One of the conditions is that it has to be people from the city. And so if people from the city hire outside instigators, so then we have the people that are behind it are the instigators are from the city. The people that are instigating are not from the city. So then it's not considered Ir Nidachas and they get judged as individuals. Although the answer is not really answering the question. Because at the end of the day is if the principle is ein shliach l'dvar avera, there is no mess agents for a sin, right? So then really it doesn't really answer the question, because then so it's not that the problem is not that they were agents. The problem is that they're not from the city. It means the people we have instigators, but they're just not from the city. So it's no different than any situation where people from outside the city come and instigate. So this answer really is problematic, because it doesn't really. It just if once you have the rule, there is no agents for transgression. So then the reason why there's not an Ir Nidachas is not because we learn from a pasuk to say that that's not, you can't have shluchim, you can't have agents. It's because you don't have, because there's no such thing as agents in any situation of a transgression. And then these people are not from the city. Okay, so the one has to see the inside this opinion that Rabbi Steinsaltz, Rabbi Even Yisrael is quoting. I say Even Yisrael and Steinsaltz is because his Talmud is known as the Steinsaltz Talmud, but the Rebbe, and he accepted that, and his son told me that's on his grave, that his last name was changed from Steinsaltz to Even Yisrael when they were going through hard times, both in the family and in their institution. Okay, so he answers like this. So it's talking about it from another city, as in that case, even if those who sent them were from the city in question, the city is not judged as an idolatrous city. That's he said. He quotes the Ramah Meiri and Shara Amelech. Again, maybe it's not because it's not unique to the idea of Ir Nidachas. There's no shlichum ledvar avera, so therefore then they're not people from the city. Okay, so the answer seems to be a little problematic. It doesn't really explain the question. Why do you have to have a special limit by Ir Nidachas? It's nothing to do with Ir Nidachas. It has to do with any transgression that there is no shliach. Okay, let's continue. Others explain that even if the agents were from the city, so then it's not the problem not from the city. In a case where they say they're not subverting at their own initiative, but rather representing others, their status is like that of minors who subvert. So here he says like this, that, and you're right, in a regular case we say ein shliach dvar vera, but over here the idea of the Ir Nidachas is very much conditioned on the relationship between the subverters and the city. So therefore, we analyze, we say it has to be people from the community. It has to be two men, not women, not children. So we see there's a lot of condition on who are the people that are subverting, who are the people that are leading astray. So then we say, what kind of person are you? You're an adult, you're male, you're older the age of 13, you're responsible for your actions. There is no agents for a transgression, but you're a person, the very fact that you're saying that it's not you, that you were instigated, means you're not a mature person. You're acting on behalf of someone else. So in this case, we're going to judge you as a minor, one would think. So therefore, and actually one would think, you are judged as a minor, so even if you're from the city, the Rosh says, so this doesn't become Ir Nidachas. That's even a bigger chiddush. Why is it a bigger chiddush? Because over here we're saying that an adult that halachically should be responsible for their own actions and ein shliach ledvar avera. Nevertheless, in this specific case, we judge them as a minor. That's a huge chiddush. Alternatively, it's speaking of a case where the subverters designated only one agent. He says that is Kedushas Yom Tif and the Rashash. Again, from Rashi, which says Aidei Shliach, doesn't say Aidei Shluchim, we can maybe understand that that's the opinion of Rashi. So in this case, it's Taka, there's a Shaila. Why? Because Ein Shliach L'Dvar Aveira. And if there was a Shliach L'Dvar Aveira, so then they would be representing possibly be representing these two cases. But still, it falls down at the end of the day. It still falls down that the reason why is because Ein Shliach L'Dvar Aveira. But even if there was a Shliach, there'd still be a problem because it's only one person. Then you could have a limud that it's one person that this one person doesn't hold the weight of two people. Okay. The Gemara continues, B'nai Belial. So here the Gemara is analyzing in general. We don't have, it's not unique to Ir Nidachas. We have the concept of Belial. So he says, what does Belial mean? If you divide the words Belial, you have Beli, pause, al from the word oil. A person who threw their yoke off. Means a person who doesn't accept upon themselves the yoke of Torah, which means bonim sheparku ol shemayim mitzavireim. Belial means people who threw the yoke of heaven off their necks. Those are the people that are instigating. Okay, so that's from the pasuk that says Yotzu Anoshim. So Yotzu means it has to be from the city. Anoshim means it has to be males. Sorry, Yotzu means them and not their shluchim, right? That's what we said. And it has to be Anoshim means it has to be males and it has to be two and not kids or females. And now it says Belial means what kind of person? We're talking about a person who's thrown the weight, the yoke of Torah off them. Mikir b'cha, from amongst you. So here there's two, we learned in the mission there's two ideas of Mikir B'cha. One means that it has to be from the city itself. That we can learn from Mikir B'cha. Also, Mikir B'cha means that it has to, when we're talking about Mikir B'cha, is not from, we're not referencing the city, we're referencing the Eretz Yisrael. Meaning Moshe is talking to all the Jewish people. So then Mikir B'cha means it has to be a city within Eretz Yisrael, not a border city. V'lo min hasfar. Here's one of the things we learn, the amazing idea of the Torah's attention to a border city. The importance of a border city, that even though technically it meets all the conditions to be Ir Nidachas, meaning they're subverters and they're men and there's two and they're not agents and they're from the city and they're from the tribe, all the conditions. And a majority of the people serve the idols. Nevertheless, it's a border city. But if the punishment of Ir Nidachas is the city gets destroyed. If we destroy a city on the border, so we're weakening Eretz Yisrael. The whole Israel gets affected. So it says Mikir B'cha v'lo min hasfar. If it's a city on the border, it doesn't have the laws of Ir Nidachas. Yoishvi Iram. Okay, here again, what does it mean, Yoishvi Iram? V'lo Yoishvi Erecheres. Again, the word is Yoishvi, not is again, we're going to learn in a second that a Yoshev is a person who lives at least 30 days. There's a difference between a person who lives in a city and a person who's a resident in a city. So Yoshvi Iram means the residents of the city. V'lo Yoishvi Erecheres. If someone comes from another city and instigates and subverts the city, that's not an Ir Nidachas. Again, it doesn't mean that you don't get punished. It's just change. It becomes, then you get judged as an individual who served idols. Lamar. So what's the Lamar saying? That they're saying is also referring to that the publicity of it. That Lamar means also referring to that in each case there has to be, and which makes it very problematic, because it's very complicated to have Eidim and Asra, witnesses and warning for each individual person. We're not talking about witnesses and warning for the instigators, for the subvert, but we're talking about the witnesses and warning for each individual of the cities. If you have a city that's X big, for everyone who serves idols. Bikir B'cha Rashi says mashma be'emsa v'lo min hasfar, means to tell us that it's talking about a city from within the Eretz Yisrael, not a border city. Shim ha'isa ira shel sfar, if it was a city from the border, bein machos oiv de kachavim machos Yisrael, if it separates the machos, the rest, the settlement of Eretz Yisrael from the nations, from those who serve idols, Eini Nasir Nidachas, we will not make it a city of Nidachas. The Gzeres HaKosavi Shalei Tasir Nidachas, the Torah tells us that we do not turn a border city into Ir Nidachas. Yoishvei ha'ir v'lo yoishvei acheres tahainu medacheha michutzala. So Rashi is just coming to clarify that what are we talking about? Obviously, we're talking about the instigators are from this, have to be from the city, not instigators from outside the city. Leimar nelcha v'navda mashma. What does it mean to come and they say, let's go serve idols that are not unfamiliar to you? Shetarach lias lifanenu. What does it mean, leimar? That the people, agents from the Bezdin, witnesses and warning have to be present at the time of this idol, of this story. What does it mean to say that there has to be witnesses that testify that these people were instigators and that the people listened and they were subverted and they served idols? Well, from here we see every person in the city. There can't be a general testimony that there was a majority of the city, etc., etc. We need every single person to be warned. Reb Evan Yisrael says, a border city is not designated as an idolatrous city. Why? Therefore, even if all the criteria of being declared as an idolatrous city are met, meaning to say a roiv, a majority, and from the city, and men, and all the things, the idolaters are judged as individuals, meaning they get stoning, and their property goes to the Yarshim. Again, in what we're talking about over here, we're talking about the Torah. One of the cases of Ir Nidachas is, of course, the Stom and Gemara. So when we're talking about over here, we're talking about a question of a society problem or an individual problem. So in order for the criteria to be met as a society issue, so we have to look at it. It could be from Rashi. When Rashi says that it's separating. What's Rashi telling us? If he wants to be analyzing every means it's you don't need Rashi to tell us what it means. A border city. Anyone knows a border city means a city on the border. So why does he say bein machuz oiv de kachav machuz Yisrael? What is he telling us? You should say that any city that's on the border. One, you could say it could be in a scenario like in the case of this after King Solomon, when Eretz Yisrael was divided into two countries, then maybe one would think that a border between Yehuda and the north. So that wouldn't qualify as Ir Nidachas, maybe because it's a border from the kingdom of Yehuda. So he says, no, it means a city of idol worshippers. Or we could understand that Rashi is coming to teach us that the reason why a border city is exempt from these laws it's not so much because of weakening the border, although we do find other laws of Sfar, of things of weakening the borders, but maybe it's the idea is because if we're looking at it as city, as a question on society and a question about the type of people that live in the city, maybe if they're bordering with another city and the other city are idol worshippers because it's no longer Eretz Yisrael, so then it's not a question of society, it's more of a question of that's the way people behave, and therefore it may not fall under the category of Ir Nidachas. Means maybe we want it to be a city that's isolated from the Jewish people. It means you're amongst the Jewish people, you're behaving differently, as opposed to people that maybe were being influenced because you're on the border and you're bordering your next city over is a non-Jewish, the Phoenicians that serve the Baal in the north. Maybe that's what Rashi comes to say. Itma, let's go further. Rabbi Yochanan Amar. Rabbi Yochanan says, Cholkin ir achas shnei shvatim. In theory, what's the point of Rabbi Yochanan over here? Is to figure out another question. Based on what we're saying here, that we have to be someone from the tribe, that it says in the Gemara. So it means that you could have a scenario that you have a city that belongs to two tribes, and it means a person is a Yoshev of the city, you're a resident of the city, but you don't have the same, you come from a different tribe. So from here we see that's possible to have a city that belongs to two tribes. He learns it from Ir Nidachas. Reish Lakish is his companion, of course, related to his brother-in-law, disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan and says, in Eretz Yisrael, we do not divide Eretz Yisrael into a city by tribes. If it's a city, that means, what would be the question? The question would be if technically the land that was given by Yeshua, we'll see another opinion in a second, but technically the land that was given by Yeshua was it kind of went into a city. So maybe Yehuda gets half the city and Shimon gets the other half of the city. So Reish Lakish says, no, we don't divide a city. Either the city goes to one tribe or goes to the other tribe. Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. So Rabbi Yochanan asks from our laws on a question on Reish Lakish. The Mishnah says, we learned last week, that one of the conditions is that the people that are instigating the subverters have to be not only from one city, but also from the same tribe. How is that possible? My love, it's possible. It's possible that the people could be a resident of a city, but not from the same tribe. Meaning to say, what do you mean the same tribe? Meaning to say is that, let's say when you analyze the majority of the city, the majority is one tribe, but there are also another tribe that has part of the city that may not be a majority. You have to understand the question over here. Because if it's 50-50, so then what's the proof? Maybe he's instigating his own tribe. So the idea is that we have over here that there's a majority that's not the tribe. And this person goes and instigates that majority. He's from the minority. He's from the city, but he's from a different tribe. So we see that's possible. Otherwise, the mission wouldn't have to say that it has to be from the city and from the tribe. Obviously, if he's from the city, he's from the tribe, because the city doesn't get divided. Shema Mina, from here we see that we could divide a city. So this is a question Rabbi Yochanan asks on Reish Lakish. Let's do Rashi. Rashi says, Cholkin, Ir Achas, Betchilas Kishacholkin. So Rashi says like this. What are we talking about here? What does it mean that you could divide a city between tribes? Betchila, in the beginning, meaning Kishacholku Yisrael as Haaretz. When the Jewish people divided the land with Joshua and then on into the judges, it's possible that you could divide a city amongst the tribes. It means that if the border, if a city is on the border, I believe there is a in northwest Washington, there's a city that the only access to that city is via Canada by land. It means if Vancouver and British Columbia border with Washington, right? So British Columbia and Washington border. So there's a part that if you have to go into Vancouver and then or into Surrey over there into Canada, and then you go back out of the border. You have to go into the border and out of the border back to America. And it became very problematic in COVID because they couldn't get out of that little city and they were stuck. So you have, so we see over here, you divide, seemingly you're dividing an area that really should be part of Canada or part of America, whatever it is, it's a city that's divided. It's not actually really a city that's divided. The city itself is kind of cut off from the rest of America. So it says, you're able to divide one city to two tribes. He gives an example. If there's a city that's on the border, one part of the city goes into the border that Joshua gives to one tribe. And thank you, Ariel. It's called Point Roberts. Yes, you're right. It's called Point Roberts. It became a big issue in COVID because they couldn't get any. And I don't remember the exact issue. I remember they're trying to get boats in from Bellingham, I think. So he says, the one tribe takes its portion that was given to it by the allocation by the draw. Like it says, the cities go on the border. That's the question. The question is if the city goes a little bit in, and the question is, do you divide the city or you have to work it out? So we look at what's the majority? The city that has the most, and then obviously what's the question if it's exactly 50-50? I mean, it's not, we have like a question in Egla Rufa, in the laws of Sota, that you can have a body that's 50-50 right between two cities. So what happens if it's exactly 50-50? It doesn't say, but Rebbe Maharayatz says we give the city to the city to the one that has the majority space or people, I guess. My love. It's possible. What do we see from here? That even though a person could be from the city, but if you're not from the tribe, so only if you're from the tribe it becomes Yer Nidachas. And if you're not from the tribe, it doesn't make one. If you're not from the tribe, that means, let's say you're going to the south side of the city, and you instigate that south, and the south is the majority. So you have enough people, you have but you're not from the tribe of the people that you instigated. Should be here. And the punishment is not by sword, by stoning. From here we see clearly that a person could be part of a city and not part of the tribe. How is it possible to be part of a city, not part of a tribe? So Rabbi Yochanan says, obviously, only in a case where you divide the city. So no. So Rabbi Lakish says that's not the only scenario how a person could be a member of the city, a resident of a city, and not be from the same tribe. It doesn't mean that you divided the city. The Nafle Yerusha. You inherited your mother, right? We just learned a few months ago the story of Bnei Slavchad, that the daughters of Slavchad wanted to have their father's inheritance. They were single young ladies, or not young, single women. And when it came time for them to get married, the members of the tribe of Menashe came to Moshe Rabbeinu and says, "No, what's going on? If they're gonna marry whoever they want to marry, then they're gonna end up mixing the tribes into our area. We don't want that, at least initially." So Moshe says they're right. The people of Menashe are correct, and therefore they have to marry their cousins, and they did. They have to marry their family. So the children should be from the tribe. But that wasn't a law always, that you had to marry your tribe, right? The tribes married each other. And let's say a mother inherited her father, there were no sons, and she inherited the land. So now you're from a different tribe because your father's from another tribe. And now you live in a city that you're not the tribe, or you have a residency. You could choose to live there. So the Naflei Birusha, Inami, Nihale b'matana. Either you inherited it, the person who's the instigator is a minority, not from the same tribe, but a member of the city, so then it's not considered an Ir Nidachas, or you got it as a gift. The question is what Rabbi Yochanan argues. What Rabbi Yochanan going to answer to this? He's not. Is Rabbi Yochanan? Maybe Rabbi Yochanan doesn't agree that's considered a resident, or maybe that's not. Maybe he argues if that's considered, you're not from the same tribe. I just want to say I don't understand why after Seed Insights. I have a little side website that gives me some notes. So it says over here that Rashi said, what would be the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan that we would divide the land in a way that the city could be divided is when Joshua divided the land. But the Yad Ramah which also a Rishon says no. It's talking about Mashiach Yavo. Mashiach is going to come, meaning to say, even Rabbi Yochanan agrees that it didn't happen in the days of Joshua, because when you initially divided the land, you could figure it out. You could change the cities. But now Mashiach comes, right? The person Mashiach comes, and all of a sudden, you live in Lud, and Lud is possibly Dan, and you're a Shimo, you're a different tribe. So Mashiach is not going to start moving people around and say, get out of your city, you go back to your tribe's place. So Mashiach comes, the land's going to come back to the situation. And you could be living in a place that's not your tribe. What's the obvious question? The obvious question is, how is it possible that there could be Ir Nidachas in the days of Mashiach, right? It says Mashiach comes, everyone's going to be serving Hashem. So the Riyad Ramah is saying that you can have, when could it be that a person is going to be of a city and not from a tribe? Mashiach comes, but how is it possible to have Ir Nidachas and the whole city serves others when Mashiach comes? It's not just a technical question, because the question goes in about also the Ari Miklat. We know the city of refuge, that there were six major cities of refuge, 3 on the east side of the Jordan, and 3 in Eretz Yisrael proper. We learn about it in Dvarim. Moshe Rabbeinu set aside, because he says mitzvah that if I could do a mitzvah, I'm going to do it, even though the cities didn't become a technical city of refuge until they conquered Eretz Yisrael. But Moshe designated the 3 cities on the east side of the river of the Jordan, and once they conquered Eretz Yisrael and they set up the other 3. But Moshe talks about one of the proofs of Mashiach and the Torah is the Rambam quotes is Ari Miklat, is cities of refuge. And he says that there's going to be another 3 cities of refuge. And one of those cities is going to happen in Kadmoni, in the other parts of Eretz Yisrael, part of the 3 nations that we didn't conquer. Avram was given 10 nations, and we only conquered 7. So those 3 lands, they're going to have another 3 Ari Miklat. And when are we going to set them up? When Mashiach comes. What's the problem? How are people killing people when Mashiach comes? There's a question about that. It's brought down that the descendants of Hevel, whatever that means, Hevel was killed by Cain, the first son, 2 sons who killed each other. The descendants of Hevel have to go to the Uri Miklat. They're going to be killed again. I don't know what that means. That's brought down in Kabbalah. But either way, we see that it's possible to have certain things when Mashiach comes, evidently, according to the Yad Ramah, but there's a concern of Ir Nidachas. Okay, let's continue. Reish Lakish says we do not divide. How is it possible that a person should be from a city and not from the tribe? Those instigators are not from the tribes, but how did they end up? How did they end up in Eretz Yisrael in that city? Is because they inherited their mother. Because the daughter, their mother, let's say, inherited in the case where she inherits. So then, and she passes away, so her children inherit her. And therefore, they inherit her land from her father's tribe, although their father's from another tribe. Okay. Another question the Gemara Rabbi Yochanan asks. Eisvei, they ask a question. It talks about when they divide Yehuda and Shimon. So it says that Yehuda, that there was aside for the Ari Miklat, we know there was the cities of the Levites. Where should the Levites live? When the cities were in Hebron. Hebron was a Levite city. I'm a Levi, so there's Levites. I think Avi, you're also Levi. So there's the Levites lived in Hebron. Who lived in whose property was Hebron? Where did Hebron fall under? It fell in Yehuda. That's why King David was a king in Hebron for 7 years. So Arim Tesha, where do these 9 cities come for the Levites? From Shimon and Yehuda. Shimon, we know, is kind of swallowed up in Yehuda's area towards the south. So Shimon is close to you, is part of Yehuda in the south, meaning the south of Eretz Yisrael. My love, so what would it mean when you have 9? How do you divide 9? It's not an even number. Arbu Pagami High, 4.5 go to, let's say, Yehuda, Arbu Pagami High, and another 4.5 go to Shimon, meaning to say one city gets divided in half. We see clearly they divided a city amongst the tribes. Now, this 9th city that kind of was divided between Shimon and Yehuda, evidently on the border of the tribe. The Gemara answers like, Arba Mihai v'chamish Mihai. One tribe got 4 and one tribe got 5. So Rashi says the question: We're talking about the tribe of Yehuda and the tribe of Shimon. The 2 of them gave up 9 cities for the Levites. They took 9 of the cities and they gave them to the Levites to live. Again, the Levites weren't allocated a place, any part of the land, so they have to live somewhere. They weren't all living in Jerusalem. My love, the shakal mihai dal the palgash hoisa iracha Yehuda v'Shimon, but not mihem alma chalkim mirachas shnei shvatim. Obviously, each city, each tribe got 4.5, meaning one city was between Yehuda and Shimon, and therefore we see that clearly you divide a city. If you want to continue to ask questions, if that's what we want to do, so we could ask the question that this is not really a proof, because that divided city goes to the Levites, and the Levites are one tribe. Meaning to say that the residents of the city, yes, technically the land belongs to, the city belongs to the tribe of Yehuda and Shimon, but it's not really a city that's divided by the Shvatim, because it's a city that was designated for the Levites. It's not for regular people, regular tribesmen to live in, so maybe that's not really a proof. No, that answer was that one tribe got 4, one tribe got 5. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, if you're saying that one tribe got 4 and one tribe got 5, the Torah should have told us so. Rashi says, Lifresh Prusha, Hai Ninu Shevet Shakal Minei Hai, Hai Ninu Shakal Minei Dal. Which tribe got 4, which tribe had to give 4, and which tribe had to give 5. The lack of information, that the Torah is not clear who has to give 4. It says shakal, who has to give 4 and who has to give 5 is the fact that it doesn't tell us, means to say that it has to be really the 4 and 1's divided. So the Gemara answers kasha. What does it mean kasha? You ask a good question. Why didn't the Torah tell us? But it's not a good enough question that we should say that from this we learn the question's a question. Means that from here we learn an amazing thing. Not every time there's a question, does the question indicate that there has to be a solution what you want. A lot of times we have problems in our life, in the situations, politically, whatever. So the question demands action. No, you have a question. It's not going to change the law. Just because you have a question, why did the Torah tell us which one gets 4, which gets 5? Loshin hapasik kasha. You're right, the pasuk is difficult. It doesn't change the facts. It doesn't shlug up Rish Lakish. It doesn't say Rish Lakish is wrong. Just because you have a question. Not every question demands that the answer is what you want to say. And that's a good lesson in life, coming up to Yom Kippur. So it just says over here, they asked the question, Tosfos asked the question Yuma based on this whole argument. Yehuda and Binyamin divided Jerusalem. We know that Jerusalem, the Beis Hamikdash itself, was partially in Yehuda and partially in Binyamin. Therefore, they had to make Jerusalem to be amongst those 2 tribes. So he says, Tosfos answers, Shalpia Dibra Hoyken, that there was special for Jerusalem. God said it should be that way. Why? Because Sanhedrin Yehuda, the Sanhedrin, the court, has to sit by Yehuda, because Yehuda hosts the courts. Part of its rule of kingship is also the law of rule of the law. The Shechina Binyamin, but the Shechina, the Beis Hamikdash, the Mizbeach has to be by Binyamin. Sanhedrin Shechaliya Smuch Migdash, and the Sanhedrin has to be next to the Beis Hamikdash. So these conditions override, even according to Rish Lakish, the idea of no division. Okay, let's go a little further. Ibailu, the Gemara asks a question. Hutchumi alein mahu. What happens if the people don't get instigated by other people, but they themselves instigate themselves? So it says, Vayadichu amrachmana, v'loishaduchu me aleihen, oidilma afilu huduchu me aleihen. Are we going to be medayik from the pasuk that it has to be vayadichu, that others instigated or subverted them, or that the outcome is the importance? And as long as the majority of a city are together, get subverted and go serve idols, that's enough. So Rashi says like this. Rebbe Eben Yisrael teaches us like this. He says like this. He says, hold on a second. If the inhabitants of a city subverted themselves to idol worship, they are judged. He's saying the law. It means the Gemara asks a question, but he's giving us the law. The law, he's quoting the Rambam Sefer Hamada. Says, if inhabitants of the city subvert themselves to idol worship, they are judged as individuals, meaning they get stoned and not beheaded, and their property belongs to those who inherit. That is the ruling of the Rambam based on the fact that the dilemma was not resolved in the Gemara, that this question that we have now is not going to be really resolved, and therefore the Rambam goes with the leniency. And the ruling is lenient in the case of uncertainty with regard to human life. Why is it lenient? It's a good question, because it really skila should be more severe. Furthermore, it's possible to say, I guess, it's not lenient with life, it's lenient with the property. Furthermore, it's possible to say that the Rambam holds that their status can be learned from the status of those subverted by women and children, like the Gemara says in a second. Gemara the rejection of that possibility is mere deflection, and the lach is not accordance with the deflection. Okay, meaning to say the Gemara is now going to ask a question, Tashma. So the Rambam likes the question better than the answer. Okay, either way, I'm not sure why he says the ruling is. I have to check again the source. Why he says that we go with the leniency when it comes to life, because we don't kill the irni dachas. If let's say you have 100 people, and 51 people, I think Ariel, you asked me last week how many people. I checked it up, there was an answer. I think it was 100 and something, and now I forgot the answer. But let's say the number is 100 people, and 51 people serve idols. They instigated, all the conditions met. They get beheaded. The other 49 people don't get killed. Their property gets burned. The city gets destroyed, but they live. So the actual death penalty of the sword, according to everyone, is more lenient and less severe than stoning. So I'm not sure why Rabbi Evan Yisrael over here says that the Rambam's ruling is based on the idea we always go lenient when it comes to the question of life. Yes, the severity of the whole story, it's not any dachas, we don't destroy the city, all those things, but the actual human life component in it was actually less. I think the difference is the children. In the case of the irni dachas, I think he means the children and women and children. And in the case of the irni dachas, the families that serve their children also get killed, like in stone. But in the case of individuals, only the person who actually serves gets stoned, not the children. Right, Toshma. If the instigators are women or children, so am I. We just learned that women and children don't make it an irni dachas. So why not? Why should it be any different than if they subvert themselves? They should consider that if the children instigate them, fine. Then we don't consider the children as instigators, but then the fact that they allow themselves to be instigated means to say that they themselves did it. Like we say, there's no agents for sin, and you're a responsible person. Well, who asked you to serve idols? The Gemara says no. At the end of the day is, again, we have to really analyze what is this irni dachas, the city of idol worshippers. But the idea is that it's a question of, we're trying to understand the character of the city. Like the city of stone. What's the Torah say? The Torah doesn't say that when Avram goes to God to plead for stone, before that the Torah says a bad city. Noshim rois ma'oid. It's a very bad people. The city has to be destroyed. This is a question of society. Society's gone astray to the point that there's no salvation. We're going to read now, coming to Nineveh. Nineveh was about to be punished like irni dachas. It doesn't get, at the end they do tshuva, but there's the idea that this is a society that can continue. So here he says that only happens in a case where, so you want to ask me a question for women and children? Women and children, then in that case, they followed the women and children. It's not such an indication. They were graded, they were schlepped by women and children. But here, if they do it on their own, maybe it's considered irni dachas. We're going to skip this Rashi. It's a diktuk Rashi about grady. What does the word grady mean? He says, Basir nafshay grady masay maisim va'adukim b'yoser. Let's look at Rashi. Rashi says, that in the case that they're women and children, the Torah looks at them as it shows something wrong in the maturity of the city for following the women and the children, but not so much of the severity of the character of the city. So he says, but if they instigate themselves, is basir nafshay grady, then they're following their own, they're being subverted by themselves. So then their action is an indication of what's going on in what's the spiritual health of the city. The question is, maybe we should make it an irni dachas, because even though they don't have individuals that are doing it, but the fact is that they do it themselves is a sign of character of the city. The fact that they're following women and children is not such a sign of the unhealth of the spiritual unhealth of the character of the city. So the Gemara says, now let's continue. One of the conditions of the city of the Ir Nidachas is that there has to be a majority. A majority of the city has to be led astray to serve idols. So now the Gemara asks the technical question. Heiche of Dinan. How does that work out? How does that happen? Omer Avhida means, what's the problem? The problem is you're not judging the city. You have to judge. We just said you have to have witnesses and judges for each individual. But the first individual is a minority. The second individual is a minority. Only after you reach 50 people, if there's 100 people, then it starts becoming a majority. Where the first 49 people are, the first 50 people are a minority. So how does that work? So done in V'chayfshin, if they see, okay, the Sanhedrin are not blind. They see the city's gone astray. So they judge the individual, the first individual, V'chayfshin, and throw them in prison, lock them up. Done in V'chayfshin, they take the next individual and they lock them up until they reach a majority. Once they reach a majority, then all those 100 people get beheaded and the property gets burnt. So Ula challenges Rav Yehuda, Amalei Ula, Nimsatem ma'anes dinam shaleilu. It takes a long time to judge everyone. And we know the halacha is that once you judge someone, the person has to be put to death right away. You can't hold up the judge, you can't hold up the punishment. So here you're holding up the punishment, you're holding these people in jail to wait to see if there's a majority or not. Ula says, no, that's not how it works. You find one person, the first person gets judged, gets stoned. Why? Because you're an individual. Second person gets judged. Let's say you have a consensus. There's 100 people in the city, right? So you one person stoned, two people. So as soon as you hit 51, okay, no more stoning. Now we start to be turned to beheading because we reached the majority. What does it mean? You have to send. You have a city. People are worshiping, bringing idols. You have to have witnesses. You have to have warning. You don't know if every person had a witness or every person had a warning. Maybe you're going to be in a scenario where there's not enough witnesses and warning. There's not enough people that had witnesses and warning. So maybe it's not any dachas. So how are you putting this person in prison and waiting his judgment or her judgment? So first, this first person, boom, stoned. And once you reach a majority, and then you say, okay, all these people that we had witnesses and had warning, and now we're ready to reach the majority of the people. So now from going forward, we start beheading. The properties doesn't have to change because you could wait to the properties. You could throw the properties of the people who got stoned. That's another question. According to Ula, if the individual got stoned, what happens to that person's property if there ends up being a majority? All right,
Question, Rabbi.
Go ahead, Ariel.
Once we've stoned that person, they're no longer a citizen of that city. Doesn't the number of idol worshippers decrease by that point? And you'll never get to a point where you'll have a majority because every time you kill one, there's less?
That's an excellent question. Evidently, we're gonna count them as what they've done. They still get counted. It means the view of the health of the city is going to be counted. Even though, yeah, it's a good question. I have to check, but I have to assume that they obviously do get counted. Otherwise, like you said, there'll never be a scenario of a Ir Nidachas. You never get to the majority.
Because we also see a lot where they try to make a situation so it's technically possible, but also technically impossible, which is why these things never happen. And I was just thinking, if that's the case, then the situation is, if this is how we rule, then technically it's impossible to ever happen.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to check in there. I have to assume that in this case, we count their numbers even though they've been stoned already. That's a good question. I don't want to say with certainty because maybe you're right. The Ir Nidachas never happened. It could be all these are part of the problems. So it's very hard. You have to have witnesses and you don't know who the majority yet. It means even if the courts come in and see 51 people bowing to idols, right? It's okay. There's no question there's a majority. But we don't know if every person had witnesses and we have to listen to every witness. This is a capital case. It's a long situation. And here, make sure they had warnings. And only then do we know if we really have a majority. So he says, you see two or three people serving idols, you judge them and you put them in prison. You don't stone them yet. You judge them And put them to prison. From the Ruban. You see if there's a majority. And then again you judge them. So he says first, according to Rav Yehuda, they get judged for stoning, but behold, let's put a pin on that. And then we continue to judge and judge and judge. And when we see we have majority, we have to rejudge these people because it's the punishment has to be rejudged. And then it's another scenario of a dachas. They have to get rejudged for punishment by beheading, and their money gets confiscated or gets burned. From here, it's mashma from Rashi that ma'avdim zemainam, the fact that he adds that in means to say up until that point. Okay, the question is, according to Ula, what would happen about them with their money? Let's see if Rashi answers that. Manes dinam shalachish nigma dinam atamasha isam manes dinam. According to Ula, says you're holding up their judgment. They've been judged for skila punishment. They have to stone them. You can't wait just because you want to see if there's a majority. We learned you're not allowed to hold up a judgment. So much so you can't do it on Shabbos because we have all these questions. Danim v'salkin ad chatzi. So you stoned, according to Ula, you judge them, you stone them up till half. The machzikin them kiyachidim because they're considered as individuals. And only after you already stoned 50%, nizbar, it turns out, becomes from the word birur, it becomes clear. Lemafreya backwards, so this kind of addresses Ariel's question, ruba, that most of the people were subservient and they were all with witnesses and a majority with witnesses and warning. And their money gets lost, and from that halfwards forward, you can't give them the more severe death of stoning because now they fall irni dachas. Like we said, the death is less, but the effect of the city is more. Again, it's mashma from Rashi that the first people I can't say again with clarity, but from the wording of Rashi, it kind of seems that the first people that get killed, according to Ula, their money goes to the Yorshim. Let's say Bonagid, a son is standing there, doesn't live in the city. The second his father's stoned, he grabs his father's stuff and runs. I mean, it's not. He's out of here. Adios. Why? Because my father, I'm the inheritors. And my father was killed. I move on. This person's father was killed. He moves on. One of the people asked a question, one of the commentators asked a question that it says, why don't we, the Yad Ramah asked a question, why don't we just listen to the testimony of all the witnesses, and then after we realize we didn't give the actual verdict yet, but we see clearly that the person A, B, C, D, Z, all up to 50% have witnesses and warning. We reached 50%, and then we give the verdict of Saif, of burning, of beheading and burning the city and taking care of and losing their property. So why don't we don't have to give the verdict. We know that they're going to get a verdict of death. We just didn't actually sentence them yet, right? In America, we have sentencing much later. So why don't we wait on the sentencing? So he says no, because one of the things we learned about is that we don't wait because sometimes the judges will forget. They have to be clear, and because they have to be clear, so this time will make them unclear. So you can't hold up on the verdict. That's the Yad Ramah says. All right, let's just continue a little bit further. Try to get as far as we can in this Gemara. Itmar. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Danim Esokin, Danim Esokin. Is that what we're holding? Yeah. So Rabbi Yochanan says, like Ula, we judge and we stone, we judge and we stun. Rish Lakish says, Marbin Batidinim. No, we don't do that. We add in, we bring in a lot of courts. Means we set up a whole bunch of courts and we could judge a whole bunch of people at the same time. And then we could get to majority before there's any sentencing and we don't have to worry about, or any punishment. So then we don't have to worry about putting people in prison. Rish Lakish Amar Marbin Batidinim. Lav Mishum de Ein done in Beis B'Yom Echad. The problem isn't that we have to set up a whole bunch of courts because you can't kill more than one person in a day, because we learned in one death penalty we can. We learned that in many eons ago in Daf Mem Vav in page 46. But because if you only had one court, it takes too long. So we set up a whole bunch of courts, so we could do all the court cases and all the judgments in one day. We could get all the testimony in one day, and then we give everyone the judgment and the sentencing in one day, and then it's not a problem. That's how Rish Lakish gets out of the issue. Eini, the Gemara says, ask a question. It's not like that. Rebbe Chama, the son of Yossi, says to him, Rav Yoshe. He says to Ishahu or Ishahi, Ish v'isha atemaitzi lisharecha. V'yatemaitzi called ir kula lisharecha. That we learned, what's the sharecha? Sharecha is, it's talking about when individuals, men and women, serve idols, then they get judged by a court of 23, which is a small court. But when we're talking about an ir nidachas, it has to be judged by the court of, we learned this, I think also, it has to be judged by the court of 71. You can't set up more than a court of 1 and 71. There's only one court of 71. So you have a lot argue, I'm not sure how this gets rid of the Yad Ramah's question. You have a lot of courts of 23, and you check in Ma'ayin B'dinim, you check all the laws, make sure that everyone had enough witnesses and warning. And then you conclude it in the Bezdin HaGadol, and there they get the verdict. So you're able to get everyone in one day, and then you move them all to the Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin judge gives them the sentencing. And the sentencing is done by the head court. The Sharecha, what's Sharecha? So it's a Chiddush, by the way, I didn't know this. When the Torah tells the Sharecha, it's coming to tell you Lebezdin Sharecha. The Bezdin in the city, and the Bezdin in the city means Sanhedrin Katana, only 23. V'yatemaitzi al Sanhedrin Gedel, but Ir Nidachas has to go to the 71. You set up a whole bunch of small courts to give them the certainty that these people are qualified to get the death penalty. And if you realize that they're the majority, then everyone goes to the great court in the Sanhedrin. All right, everyone. I think this finishes this piece. Again, we're going to try to as fast as, hopefully in sometime in Cheshvan, we should finish Sanhedrin. So we'll start looking into let's try to figure out how we're going to make a siyum internationally, and we will look into the next sugya, what the next masechta we're learning. All right, I want to wish everyone a gemar chesima tova, good kiben shiyar, b'toiv nir v'anigla, and again we're learning about ir nidachas. We're going to be saying the Haftorah of Ninveh. It's a good time for tshuva on these ideas, and we should be zeicha to the Gula B'Kariv. Everyone, take care. Laila tov. Take care. Have an easy, meaningful fast.